This morning, Prince William opening up in a rare and candid conversation about supporting both his wife Catherine and his father King Charles in their cancer journeys.
The British royalty is in damage control mode. The monarch has now ordered for an unroyal exit for his younger brother.
The moment came when Prince William addressed reporters in his capacity as heir apparent, confirming for the first time that King Charles III is undergoing serious treatment after being diagnosed with a form of cancer. He conveyed the gravity of the situation with the calm resolve expected of a future monarch, but behind the composed exterior, the full weight of the revelation was unmistakable. The news had been announced by Buckingham Palace earlier, stating that during treatment for an enlarged prostate, a separate issue had emerged which required an immediate schedule of regular treatment. What Prince William confirmed carried echoes of the palace statement. Yet in his own words, the event assumed a deeper resonance. The heir stepping forward to speak of the health of his father, to acknowledge the disruption to public duties, and to mark a turning point in the reign of the king. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. William's confirmation came not as a passing remark, but as a deliberate acknowledgement of a shifting moment in the monarchy. He spoke without theatricality or flourish. This was neither a staged statement nor an emotional appeal, but a sober admission of a reality that affects not just the individual at its heart, but the institution around him. The king's diagnosis, confirmed publicly in early February 2024, came as an unexpected complication to what had first been a routine prostate procedure. In telling the world that his father was under treatment, William in effect signaled recognition of the fragility inherent even at the highest levels of public life, that the crown is not insulated from the hazards of health and the passage of time. The implications for the monarchy were immediate and wide-ranging, with the king advised to postpone his public-facing duties while undergoing treatment. The task of carrying forward day-to-day representation, engagements, and constitutional obligations implicitly shifted in part to William and other senior royals. For William, the confirmation was not simply an announcement. It was acceptance of greater visible responsibility and the invocation of a readiness to act not only as son, but as deputy and potential consort to the throne. The weight of that dual role, of caring family member and duty-bound public figure, became palpable in this exchange. Even as William made the confirmation, beneath the surface lay deeper questions. What does it mean for the continuity of the monarchy when a sovereign enters treatment? How many engagements will need to be adjusted? How many schedules rewritten? The announcement implicitly acknowledged that the king will maintain state business, papers, red boxes, constitutional functions. But public ceremonies, official visits, and the kind of high-profile visibility that define the role would need recalibration. The message was clear. The monarchy must proceed, but in a new dynamic adapted to the circumstances. William's decision to speak publicly also carried a personal dimension. In confirming his father's condition, he assumed a visible role rather than letting the king's office alone manage communications. That itself is a form of transition, of preparation for later, but also of recognition that the public realm demands transparency even from the most private of families. His confirmation signaled to the country and the world that the succession line is not merely nominal but active, that the next generation is already functioning in support of the institution. For William, but also for the monarchy, the moment represented a turning of gears. In terms of royal family dynamics, the confirmation brought into focus the interplay of roles between the king, William, and others. It placed the Wales household, already accustomed to duties and engagements, at the forefront of attention not solely as a branch of the family, but as a key axis of continuity. William's act of confirming the news underscored the seriousness of the king's situation and by extension reminded the public of the human vulnerability behind the crown. The king's treatment, drawn out and requiring careful management, means William will almost certainly see his public responsibilities deepen, either temporarily or as a sustained shift. The national implications are equally profound. The British monarchy rests partly on the image of continuity, stability, and the unbroken presence of the sovereign as a figurehead and symbol. Announcing that the sovereign has a health condition which necessitates scaling back public duties unsettles that image, and the confirmation from William laid bare the vulnerability behind the ritual. Citizens seeing their head of state stepping back or being less visible faces a subtle shift in expectation. In making the announcement, William helped preempt speculation, unease, or uncertainty by acknowledging the matter openly, thus reinforcing the notion that the monarchy can adapt and weather such moments. From a constitutional standpoint, the confirmation also raises questions of delegation, deputizing, and the limits of ceremonial representation. While the king's paperwork and formal functions may continue, the more public rituals, the speeches, the tours, the appearances, will need alternate arrangements. William's confirmation brought that into sharper relief, suggesting the presence of a practical plan for the monarchy to continue functioning even as the sovereign steps back, albeit temporarily. It is a recognition that symbolic duties and constitutional roles may sometimes diverge from physical capacity, and the institution must accommodate such divergences. The personal dimension for William is intense. To step forward and provide that confirmation is to publicly bear the weight of family and duty simultaneously. It means wrestling with emotions while maintaining composure, negotiating private concerns and public expectation. The moment is not one of ceremony, but of substance, of a son addressing that his father, the king, has entered a new chapter of health uncertainty. In that mixture of personal and public, he finds himself both protector of his father's legacy and executor of his own future responsibilities. William's reference to his father's treatment and to the postponement of duties was measured, but the mere fact of speaking reflected a shift in the royal landscape. In the wider context of the monarchy's future, the confirmation of the king's condition by William also carries the resonance of generational transition. It brings into relief that time moves on, that even the oldest institutions must adapt, and that the next generation of royals are not simply waiting in the wings, they are already bearing weight. The news is not solely about health, but about the changing architecture of power, duty, and visibility within the monarchy. It is an inflection point where the future is subtly, perceptibly stepping onto the stage. There are inevitably questions that surround such an announcement. How the king's schedule will be managed, how social and diplomatic demands will be fulfilled, how continuity will be maintained without overtly signaling that the monarchy is weakened. William's confirmation is a piece of that management. It does not provide full detail, but it acknowledges reality. It offers reassurance that the system remains functional, robust, and capable of adapting. It touches the heart of monarchy as institution, that it is simultaneously personal and political, symbol and service, stable and human. For the public, William's confirmation invites reflection on mortality, service, and leadership. A sovereign undergoing treatment becomes more accessible as a human being, reminding the nation that titles and crowns do not exempt anyone from life's fundamental challenges. Yet the announcement also reinforces the notion of resilience. Even when health falters, the role persists. The function continues. William's voice in confirming the news gave a kind of bridge between those two states, vulnerability and duty. In the corridors of power, the confirmation has signal value. Politicians, officials, diplomatic corps, and international partners will interpret William's words as the start of a recalibration of the monarch's availability. The crown's machinery will likely shift into a mode where senior royals assume greater visible roles, where planning and representation remain continuous, but with adjusted visibility. William's confirmation marks the beginning of that shift in perception, from the singular figure of the king as public face to a more distributed model of royal presence. The confirmation by Prince William of his father's health condition was only the beginning of a story which touches deeply on service, legacy, and the hidden trials that quiet duty can bring. Beyond the statement lies a sequence of subtle yet profound shifts, both for the royal institution and for the man who occupies the throne, King Charles III. The moment marked a threshold, but what follows is a tapestry of consequences, of rearranged responsibilities, of institutions adapting, of symbolism intersecting with the human. King Charles's diagnosis emerged during a routine medical procedure in early 2024, when treatment for an enlarged prostate triggered deeper investigations. Once it became public, the revelation carried more than personal meaning. It exposed the delicate balance of the monarchy. The sovereign must be at once private and public, expected to remain ever visible even while needing the quiet of medicine and rest. In the days after the confirmation, the machinery of the monarchy shifted. Engagements were rescheduled, royal diaries were revised, some public events were postponed or reassigned to other members of the family. The formal language used by palace officials emphasized that the king would continue to handle state business and paperwork, while public-facing duties would be temporarily curtailed. It was a pragmatic adjustment, but with deeper symbolic weight. The sovereign, figurehead of continuity, visibly stepping back, however briefly, challenged assumptions about always-present leadership. For William, the confirmation carried a double burden: the personal knowledge of his father's challenge and the public role of articulating it. Serving as the voice of the future, he helped frame this as not a moment of crisis, but a moment of transition. The monarchy, he signaled, would not falter. It would adapt. The heir's acknowledgement underlined that succession is not only about inheritance of the crown, but also about readiness, visibility, and participation in the workings of the institution before the formal moment of accession. Meanwhile, King Charles himself began walking a line between treatment and duty. From the publicly available updates, it is clear he sought to maintain engagements, to remain active. An aide explained that the illness is something you manage, rather than something that stops life entirely. While the palace did not divulge details of the diagnosis, the sovereign returned to public duties by April 2024. That return acted as a signal. The monarchy and its occupant would not stand still. Yet the very decision to resume engagements also placed into relief the extraordinary pressures of the role. It is one thing to navigate health in private, another to do so under the public gaze. The domestic narrative of monarchy is therefore shifting. The king's health condition rendered visible the coordination behind the scenes, the medical advice, the scheduling of duties, the recalibrated expectations that even majesty must rest. In parallel, the visual of a monarch who must sometimes step aside or be less visible reminds the public that no position is entirely immune to vulnerability. That shift has resonance, as citizens watch their sovereign continue, yet subtly change how he moves and what he does. The nature of leadership is reframed. It's no longer only about an always-on presence. It's also about adaptation, resilience, and doing what one can when one can. On the international stage, the confirmation echoes too. When a head of state undergoes treatment, the diplomatic and ceremonial implications ripple outward. Touring schedules, state visits, embassy audiences, investitures, all these incorporate an extra layer of contingency. Personnel may need to step in, engagements may be twinned or split. The world watches not just what the sovereign says, but whether he appears, whether he travels, whether the official photograph shows the same tall figure at full ease. The confirmation by William signaled to foreign governments and ceremonial partners that while the sovereign remains the constitutional linchpin, there is a temporary shift in rhythm. Within the royal family, the confirmation also affects dynamics. The king is not only sovereign, he is father, husband, grandfather. For William, stepping into a more communicative role regarding his father's health means navigating the overlap between family and institution. He becomes partly spokesperson, partly son. The clarity of that role matters because it shows the public the architecture of monarchy. The continuity of duty does not preclude the intimacy of family. The confirmation, then, was an act that brought those worlds together. Watching how the royal household reorganizes responsibilities reveals subtle changes in who may be seen, who may speak, who may represent on behalf of the monarch when he cannot. One of the important implications lies in public perception of the crown as an institution. Monarchy thrives not just on ceremony but on public confidence. The idea that the king's health might limit some high-profile duties introduces tension into the image of unbroken continuity. However, by speaking openly, via William, the monarchy demonstrated one of its strengths, the capacity to address change rather than ignore it. The confirmation forestalled speculation, answered questions before they became rumors, and thereby helped manage the narrative. It reinforced the notion that the monarchy remains stable, not because nothing ever changes, but because when change occurs, the institution adapts. The nature of the king's ailment, undisclosed type undergoing regular treatment, adds another layer. The lack of full public detail is a calculated decision, privacy balanced with transparency. While the monarchy never decreased in its public visibility entirely, The confirmation itself set boundaries around what would and would not be shared. That distinction matters. It says, "We will tell you enough to understand the scale of what is happening. We will not give you everything because some matters are personal." In doing so, the institution sends a message about resilience, dignity, and discretion in equal measure. Another dimension is generational. In confirming the news, William foreshadowed a future era. Not only is William involved in representation now, the confirmation underscored that the next generation is already stepping into more active service. The institution is not paused, rather, it is recalibrated. For the public, this moment becomes part of the evolving narrative of monarchy, how continuity can be maintained even when the person at the top changes or is less visible. That narrative is important because monarchy's durability depends on more than one person. It depends on a system that works with and through individuals. There are also implications for how the monarchy engages with health as a theme. The king's diagnosis, coming at a time when he is patron or directly involved in many charitable health-related efforts, adds a layer of personal authenticity to those charitable causes. By virtue of his situation, his advocacy for early diagnosis, for cancer research, for care structures gains resonance. The confirmation of his condition is thus more than personal news. It becomes part of the monarchy's public role in health advocacy. The sovereign is no longer just patron. He is someone whose very health circumstances reflect the cause he supports. From a practical standpoint, the schedule of the crown undergoes subtle changes. The king's presence may be more selective, with certain duties deferred, others delegated. The palace statement at the time of diagnosis indicated the king would continue state business and paperwork, but would postpone public-facing duties. That sets a precedent. A sovereign can continue core constitutional functions while modulating the visible ones. For courtiers, advisors, and palace staff, this means planning with new parameters. What is essential? What is public? What can be deferred? What can be held in reserve? That means shifts in how engagements are chosen, how presence is managed, how communication is shaped. The confirmation by William thus initiated a phase of organizational adaptation as well as public messaging. An unspoken but compelling implication is how this moment changes the public's sense of time. A reign by design is open-ended, committed to duration more than a predetermined endpoint. But when the sovereign's health becomes a public matter, the perception of duration shifts. The public is reminded of mortality, of the finite nature of even the highest offices. In that reminder lies both humility and urgency. Humility in recognizing that no monarch is immune, and urgency in the sense that each year, each engagement, each moment of presence counts. The confirmation by William was, in some sense, a moment of reckoning. The monarchy acknowledges that time is passing, that the king's capacity is dynamic, not static. In the media landscape, too, the confirmation altered the framework of coverage. Rather than unspoken speculation, the narrative became anchored. The press could reference the confirmation, the statement by the heir, the palace's announcement. That makes for transparency, but also for scrutiny. The monarchy entered a phase where normal periods of abeyance or absence were less easily policed. They would now be measured against what had been confirmed. The king's fans, the public watchers, the media all now had a baseline from which to interpret postponements, shifts, absences. That changes the dynamic of public communication and institutional briefing. For William himself, this confirmation may mark a shift in how his own role is seen. He is not just heir in waiting, he is active participant. The confirmation could mark a practical rehearsal of the duties he will one day assume. Speaking publicly on behalf of the monarchy, providing reassurance to the nation, stepping into bigger representative roles when necessary. The moment signals to the public that William is engaged not just in future promise, but in present responsibility. That perception shift matters for how the monarchy is staged, both now and in the years ahead. Another dimension worth considering is how the confirmation resonates with the nation's broader collective experience of health, age, and service. The sovereign's diagnosis mirrors, in scale if not in detail, the health challenges faced by many people and families. The idea that a head of state might face treatment, might partially scale back duties, might adapt, offers a relatable human moment, but within the context of an institution built around continuity. The confirmation, therefore, is a bridge between royalty's tradition and modern reality. It helps frame monarchy not as remote or untouchable, but as service framed by human experience. As this phase unfolds, the confirmation also invites reflection on what the public face of monarchy means when the private self is undergoing treatment. The king remains visible. He continues engagements, yet the schedule is adjusted and the public narrative is managed. The confirmation by William created the space for the institution to lean into a new normal, one where the sovereign remains active but at a differently paced rhythm. That rhythm shift is subtle but meaningful. It recalibrates expectations for what monarchy looks like when the occupant is managing health rather than simply showcasing vitality. Internationally, the confirmation also matters for the perception of the crown within the Commonwealth and abroad. Diplomats, heads of state, overseas governments all engage with the monarchy not just symbolically but practically. The confirmation signaled to them that the sovereign remains at work, but that his capacity may be modulated. That acknowledgement fosters practical realism. State visits might require adaptation, ceremonial roles might be shared, representation may be distributed. The confirmation sets the tone for a monarchy that remains inclusive of second-generation involvement without raising alarms about incapacity. The impact on the broader royal team also cannot be underestimated. Behind the scenes, there are staff, advisors, medical professionals, communications teams whose work must accommodate the new circumstances. The confirmation by William effectively announced a recalibration across the House. Schedules, risk assessments, travel, public appearances, all must take into account the king's treatment schedule and his health constraints. That recalibration reinforces that monarchy is not static glamour but an active institution with operational needs. The moment the heir spoke became a kind of milestone in the internal logistics of the royal household. Reflecting on the future, the confirmation also becomes part of the king's legacy. Monarchs are remembered by what they did, how they served, how they adapted. The public knowledge of his diagnosis and the openness of that process marks a chapter in his reign. It will influence how historians, citizens, and observers perceive this period. It underscores that this reign is lived out not only in accession and coronation, but in adaptation and endurance. The confirmation is therefore a turning point, not just for the moment, but for how the era will be remembered. Within the public sphere, the confirmation also influences how society views elder leadership. The king's advancing years, he is in his mid-70s, and his continuing treatment serve as a live example that age does not equate to retreat, but may equate to new kinds of adaptation. For organizations that rely on elder statesmen, for institutions that prize longevity, the message is relevant. Continued service may not mean unchanged service, it may mean shifted service. The king's confirmation through William thus becomes an emblem of elder leadership evolving rather than ending. In terms of monarchy's symbolism, the confirmation also touches on faith, duty, service, and the human condition. The sovereign's health journey marries the idea of the crown's continuity with the universal experience of facing mortality. The confirmation by William humanized the monarchy in a way few public statements have done, by acknowledging vulnerability, by allowing the institution to pause and adapt, by showing that even the highest office must respond to personal challenge. That humanization, far from weakening monarchy, may reinforce its relevance in a modern age where institutions must show flexibility and authenticity. Even the communication around this event matters. The way William stepped in, the way the palace released statements, the way the public was informed, all speak to evolving norms of royal communication. Gone are the days of complete silence about serious health matters. Now, there is a calibrated transparency. The confirmation by William is part of that pattern. Not full disclosure, but not complete reticence either. That in itself signifies change for the institution. Monarchy is adapting to a media environment where hidden problems tend to become public, and where proactive announcements help frame narrative rather than reactive response. The confirmation presents a moment of national reflection. People may think of their own families, their own health concerns, aging parents, and the demands of service and duty. The king's experience echoes those themes. The public may find in the confirmation not only concern for the monarch, but also empathy for the human behind the title. In that sense, the confirmation becomes more than news. It becomes a societal mirror. In sum, The confirmation by Prince William of King Charles's health condition was a gateway into a complex phase for the monarchy. It brought into focus questions of duty and adaptation, of generational transition and institutional resilience, of personal challenge and public service. It signaled to the nation and to the world that the crown is capable of transparency, of evolution, of moving forward even when the sovereign must slow. The moment reshaped expectations, shifted roles, and framed a new chapter of a reign that is lived as much in adaptation as in tradition. In the weeks following Prince William's confirmation, the subtle transformation within Britain's constitutional and emotional landscape deepened further. The monarchy's rhythm adjusted not only through formal schedules, but also in the tone of national discourse. The idea that the king, emblem of duty and endurance, was undergoing treatment reshaped how citizens and commentators alike perceived the crown. Public dialogue began to revolve around compassion and continuity in equal measure. The sovereign's health, rather than diminishing reverence, seemed to draw a renewed intimacy between monarch and people, a quiet understanding that the head of state shares the same human trials that confront every family across the country. At the heart of this change lies a newfound transparency. The royal family, historically cautious in its revelations, has allowed just enough insight to maintain trust without surrendering dignity. William's act of confirmation bridged an important gap between public expectation and private reality. It set a precedent for how the monarchy can communicate in an age defined by immediacy and social scrutiny. The approach is neither evasive nor indulgent. It is deliberate, balancing the people's right to be informed with the monarch's right to privacy. This equilibrium, once elusive, now defines the modern crown, one that must preserve mystery while living under perpetual observation. The king's health has also become a prism through which questions of purpose and endurance are refracted. Having long championed environmental stewardship, interfaith dialogue, and cultural preservation, Charles's continuation of his work even under treatment projects a potent symbol of resolve. His decision to keep engaging with the public through limited but carefully chosen appearances reaffirms his belief that monarchy is not about personal comfort but public service. Each appearance, each audience with ministers now carries additional significance, gestures not only of duty but of perseverance. Through them, the monarch becomes a living metaphor for the endurance of the state itself. For William, the implications extend far beyond the immediate necessity of supporting his father. The confirmation has quietly accelerated his evolution from heir to acting custodian of stability. Every appearance he makes now carries the subtext of preparation. Every word he speaks reflects both continuity and impending transition. His composure in addressing his father's health has reinforced public perception of him as steady and disciplined, characteristics essential for the monarchy's next phase. The moment revealed not merely filial loyalty, but constitutional maturity. The transformation of a prince shaped by personal trials into a statesman capable of embodying both empathy and authority. The Queen's role within this framework has also become quietly pivotal. As companion and consort, she stands both beside her husband and at the forefront of public reassurance. Her visible calm, her sustained schedule of engagements, and her dignified presence reinforce the sense of stability that the public seeks. Together, she and William form a dual presence, one embodying support within the private sphere, the other carrying the banner of duty in the public one. Through their actions, the crown projects not frailty, but cohesion. Across the Commonwealth, the reverberations are being felt in gentle but perceptible ways. The king's health and William's poised handling of the matter have encouraged reflections on succession, governance, and symbolic unity among member nations. In regions where Republican debates simmer, the monarchy's openness and adaptability present a counter-narrative, that the institution can evolve without losing its ceremonial gravity. The acknowledgement of vulnerability becomes a demonstration of strength, not weakness. As the king's treatment continues, the monarchy enters a period marked by introspection and quiet determination. The atmosphere within Buckingham Palace reflects a new kind of energy, measured, deliberate, and aware of time's passage. Advisors, family members, and courtiers have adjusted to a routine that balances recovery with continuity. State documents continue to arrive daily in the famous red boxes, but there is a more reflective tone to proceedings. as though every act of service carries an added sense of purpose. The crown endures not through ceremony alone, but through the steady rhythm of governance carried out behind closed doors. For the public, the evolving narrative has fostered a renewed respect for the sovereign's fortitude. Citizens see a monarch not distant or ceremonial, but one facing difficulty with steadfast grace. William's earlier confirmation laid the groundwork for this understanding, an acceptance that leadership can coexist with fragility. Across Britain and beyond, the monarchy's image now carries a gentler, more human hue. The moment has drawn people closer, inviting empathy rather than mere admiration. In this season of challenge, the royal family stands not as untouchable symbols, but as figures of shared endurance, reminding the nation that service continues even in vulnerability. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Princess William confirming tragic news about King Charles's health? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.